What's brilliant about Perfect Amino is that it's 99% utilized.
Which is true. Well, you really need the amino acids to sustain the structural integrity of your body.
I had been a vegetarian because I thought that this was the healthiest way you could be. Your average person loses about 25 to 30% of their lean body mass between age 20 and 60. I was losing lean body mass, and I didn't even know it.
As we get older, we actually need more amino acids, more proteins. In the majority of cases, in my opinion, we see the expression of disease and the expression of pathology because of deficiencies in the body.
The only thing better that comes naturally is
Hey guys, welcome back to the Ultimate Human Podcast. I'm your host, human biologist Gary Brecka, where we go down the road, everything anti-aging, biohacking, longevity, and everything in between. And today I am really excited to have a very special guest, someone I consider a close friend on the podcast. He drove all the way down to see me from Tampa. So we're in Miami right now. And this doctor, who's certified, board certified in pediatrics and also has a fellowship in infectious disease, has completed 44 Ironman triathlons, wrote an incredible book, which is a must read if you are looking at improving your athletic performance. It's called The Search for the Perfect Protein. What you think you know about proteins may shock you, and what you don't know about proteins may also shock you. And this doctor runs one of the largest integrated medicine clinics in the country. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. David Minkoff. I am really, really happy to have you on the podcast today. And I think this is going to be, it's one of those podcasts where I have so much intellectual curiosity for what you've done in your practice and the areas where you have had success in treating your patients. And my audience is going to be fascinated by our discussion today. But, you know, we were talking before the podcast about where are we going to start? And there were just so many areas. My chief of staff was like, you guys are going to eat each other's face. But, you know, one of the areas that I'd like to talk about, I'd love to talk about your books, The Search for the Perfect Protein, because in this book, you talk about weight loss, depression, fatigue, insomnia, as some of the things that protein deficiency and protein imbalance could lead to. So can you just give us an overview of what led to the search for the perfect protein?
Great. So in doing Ironman triathlons, there's a lot of training. So a lot of swim, bike, run, yoga, weights, the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I got injured. I tore my hamstring. And I did for about a year, I could not get it to heal. I iced it and colded it and injected it and chiropractored it and massaged it. And it just never stably got strong. So that if I would try to go out and go to the track and do a workout, I could feel if I was going to push it, it was going to tear again. And so I was on a search to something's wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And I ran into a guy and he started talking to me about amino acids. And amino acids are the building blocks for protein.
And you know, I think most people think amino acids are proteins.
Right.
But they're not proteins.
They're not protein. Okay. So you have a structure and it's made, so we have this building, this beautiful building that we're in here now, but it's made out of different things. It's got concrete and it's got, different kinds of fabrics and it's got wood and it's got all these things. And when you put those things together, you get a building. Mm-hmm. So in nature, there's a debate 20 to 22 amino acids. Okay. Now, amino in Greek means nitrogen. So these are nitrogen-containing molecules. And they're in nature. And our bodies use these molecules to build protein. So if someone eats, let's say, a steak, it goes into their stomach, it gets digested, it gets broken down from this long chain of amino acids, which are a protein, into individual amino acids. Because if you took one steak fiber, one meat fiber, and you counted how many amino acids were in there, it's about 5,600 amino acids per single fiber.
Wow.
Now, that fiber's too big for our intestine, our small intestine, to accept. So it has to be broken down. So it goes into the stomach. Protein digestion starts in the stomach. There's an enzyme there called pepsin, and it starts being chopped up, and then it goes into the small intestine. It gets chopped up until there's single amino acids, sometimes 2 or 3, but they're small enough to actually get in.
To the bloodstream.
To the bloodstream. So then they go to the bloodstream, they go to the cells. The cells take in those amino acids, and then the cells have a way to assemble them into the proteins that they're making. So enzymes are proteins, like enzymes for energy, enzymes for digestion, enzymes for detoxification. Hair is protein, skin is protein, muscles are protein. The whole immune system is protein. All the communication particles, many of the neurotransmitters and the hormones are protein-based.
And I think most people associate amino acids and proteins with just lean muscle, like eat protein to have big muscles. And we just think that amino acids are only important for building healthy muscle tissue, which is true, but the immune system and all of these other structures in the body.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest protein in the body is collagen, which is the structural proteins. And the second biggest one is hemoglobin. It's the blood. You know, it's the component of blood. So this assembly project for the body is going on 24 hours a day. And one of the most interesting examples, if you take the gut lining, like the cells that line the membranes from your mouth to your bottom, if you spread them out, it would be the surface area of about 2 tennis courts. Now that membrane is supposed to turn over, like you get a new layer about every 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
So those cells die, new ones have to be made. It's a massive project. Now all of our body, about every 84 days or so, the body pretty much turns over. Tissues are at a different rate. The back of the retina, the macula, where the vision is where you can see the sharpest. Every 2 days you get a new layer.
Wow.
So we need amino acids in mass in order to supply the building materials for the body. Now the body is able to recycle them. When we're little, the recycling is very good.
Okay.
When you get older, the recycling isn't very good. And so your protein, your amino acid requirements go up as you get older.
Right.
Because you don't digest them as well, you don't recycle them as well. And if you're going to maintain your body, you're going to maintain your inner membranes and your eyes and your bones, you got to have a very good source of amino acids.
So you're of the school that as we get older, we actually need more amino acids, more proteins, which, by the way, agrees with the guest I had on last week, Dr. Walter Longo. Who's one of the leading authorities on fasting.
Yeah.
And he said the same thing. After age 65, your protein requirements go up considerably.
Yeah.
Which is kind of not what
your
we think.
average person loses about 25 to 30% of their lean body mass between age 20 and 60. So that's muscle, it's bone, it's tendon, it's brain. It's lost because the body is not getting enough or is unable to utilize it well enough to keep the tissues healthy.
Now, is that sarcopenia or is that...
Well, that's sarcopenia, but it's not just sarcopenia. Before I started taking what we now call Perfect Amino, so it's a mixture of essential amino acids.
I take it every day, yeah.
Yeah. So we take these essential amino acids. Before I started taking it, I had been a vegetarian, okay? Because I thought that this was the healthiest way you could be. So I was a vegetarian. I'm doing triathlons. The demands on the body were high. I get my injury, and then I started playing with amino acids, and we got a formula where the amino acids were like the exact right ratio for the body to utilize, like maximally. So, like if you put this stuff in, 99% of it would actually go toward making body protein.
Wow.
Okay? And so what I found after a couple of months is that I put on about 9 pounds of lean body mass. My leg healed. I went to Ironman Canada, which is a very tough race. It's a mountain race. It swims in a very cold lake. And I had my best time ever. 3 months after just recovering from a hamstring injury. And I was looking at it and did some body analysis. My waist wasn't any bigger. My biceps didn't measure any bigger, but I filled in heart, liver, bones, tendons, because they were wasting. I was in the same as everybody else. I was losing lean body mass, and I didn't even know it. And back then, this is 20 years ago, the awareness of body mass and DEXA scanning and all this stuff, nobody was really looking at any of this stuff.
Sure.
So my body didn't look any different, but I bet you I was getting toward osteopenia because I wasn't getting enough protein to keep the structure of my body.
So, and really getting enough amino acids to keep the structure
that's the
of the
thing.
body,
The
right?
essential thing is the amino acids. It's not the protein. And so it does matter what protein you eat, because the makeup of the protein, like the amino acid makeup of proteins, makes a difference. And there's, depending on who you talk to, 8 or 9 essential amino acids that, depending on how much of each of those is in the protein, gives you the quality of the protein. And quality is how much of it can your body actually utilize to make its own protein.
So what would be some good protein sources? And by good, I mean, how would you rank proteins? You probably rank amino acids very high, but in terms of ingesting protein, meat, eggs, poultry, plant sources, how would you rank proteins?
So you can measure this. And there is a formula where you can measure how much. So amino acids differ from the other 2 macronutrients. So the macronutrients are carbohydrates and fats and proteins. Proteins, amino, have nitrogen. Carbohydrates and fats don't have nitrogen.
Okay.
If you take the amino off the protein, you have a carb. Okay? So all the fats and carbs are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen mixtures. Amino acids have nitrogen, sometimes they have sulfur. So if you can measure, get someone in neutral nitrogen balance, like they've had a really good diet for a month, and then feed them a mono protein source. Let's just start with whey proteins. Feed them whey protein for a month, and you collect urine every day, and you measure how many grams of nitrogen came in. So proteins are about 16% nitrogen.
Okay.
So if I ate 100 grams of whey protein, so fruits and vegetables have negligible proteins in them. So eat fruits and vegetables and just whey protein. And let's say you took 100 grams a day of whey protein. That would equal about 16 grams of nitrogen. Okay, so in is 16 grams. Now we're going to measure how much comes out.
Right.
Most of it comes out of the urine. A little bit in sweat, a little bit in feces, but most of it is coming out of the urine. Okay?
Okay.
So we do this for a month. 100 grams in every day, how much comes out? And if you do the equation, about 84% comes out.
Wow.
Which means that the amino acid wasn't made into a protein because it came out. If it got made into bone or muscle or the back of your eye or hair, it doesn't come out.
It would have been utilized.
It would have been utilized. And utilized equals made into a protein.
And is this on whey protein?
Whey protein is about 16%.
Wow.
Soy is about 16 or 17%. Okay? Plant proteins are all below 10%.
Wow.
Because they're missing essential amino acids. Leucine, methionine in the plant proteins is very low. So the body needs those, and they just don't get enough. The shocker one is collagen.
Yeah.
Because collagen doesn't have tryptophan, which is one of the essential amino acids. So theoretically, if you just had collagen and you couldn't recycle any of your proteins, you wouldn't be able to make protein because it's missing tryptophan, and virtually all the proteins in the body, except collagen, has tryptophan. So then if we go up the scale, meats and fish are in the 33% amino acid utilization. Okay? The best one is whole chicken egg, or the second best one is whole chicken egg, which is about 48%.
So these are your pasture-raised eggs.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you got to eat the yolk.
Right.
Because methionine is mainly in the yolk. And if you just eat egg whites, your utilization goes down to 16 or 17%. So don't eat egg whites. It's not a very good protein source. The yolk is like super important. The only thing better that comes naturally as food is breast milk.
Okay.
And breast milk's about 49% utilized. But breast milk's hard to get.
Yeah, and it's socially frowned upon at our age. Too.
Yeah. Now, what's brilliant about Perfect Amino is that it's 99% utilized.
Right.
Like if you do the measurement, 99% of it stays in, less than 1% of it comes out. Right. So the massive success stories that we get from people who take it, like my chronic plantar fasciitis healed. My hair's now growing too fast. I have to go to the hairdresser too often. My nails are growing again. My digestion's better. My energy's better. It's because they are able to utilize this to make their body protein, and they can fill in their bodies the way I was filling mine.
Right. I think what's really interesting about your story about the loss of lean body mass is when people think about losing lean body mass, they think about just losing a little bit of muscle.
Yeah.
But you're talking about bone, connective tissue, collagen, the actual structure of the human body, and that amino acids are responsible for structural integrity in much more than just bone. And I think that's the message I really want to resonate with people as we think I have to eat protein to sustain my muscle mass, which is true. Well, you really need the amino acids to sustain the structural integrity of your body
and the functional integrity. Because all the an enzyme is a protein. So all the enzymes that are needed for, like millions and billions of reactions that occur in the body, if the body is short on enough essential amino acids, those enzyme systems are going to be slow. We see people who are hypothyroid, like you measure their level of thyroid hormone in their body and it's low. And then we do panels on people. So we measure what are their amino acid levels. And you see that their tyrosine level, which is the parent compound for thyroid hormone, well, they've got low tyrosine. And then you look at their iodine levels, and they got low iodine levels. And they're not hypothyroid because anything's wrong with their thyroid. They're hypothyroid because their thyroid needs these materials in order to build the hormone. And so you give them back tyrosine, you give them iodine, and sometimes they need selenium and zinc and magnesium, some other cofactors, and then whoop, their thyroid hormone goes back up to normal. And they were deficient. This thing you say all the time is what's wrong with the body is it's got deficiencies. Well, it absolutely does. That's what's wrong.
And this fits so well philosophically with what I talk about all the time, which is, in the majority of cases, in my opinion, we see the expression of disease and the expression of pathology because of deficiencies in the body. And when you rob the body of certain raw materials, you get the expression of that disease. And, I have seen in clients that I've worked with and my clinical team has worked with, miracles happen in the human body when you just give it the raw material it needs to do its job.
Right.
Thyroid is another big one. And I'd love to take a little diversion real quick and talk about thyroid. Can I
just give one more thought on this? Because this is sort of a crux of a whole lot of stuff. There are tens of millions of people that are walking around that are taking medication that block stomach acid.
Yes.
So they are prescribed Pepsid or Tagamet.
Proton pump inhibitors.
Proton pump or Nexium. These drugs are very popular. They used to be prescription only. Now most of them are over the counter. Now what that drug does is it blocks the stomach from being able to produce hydrochloric acid. Okay? So these people have indigestion. They think it's because of the acid. They turn off the acid. They feel better. I get it. In the PDR, in the physician test reference, it says that these drugs should not be used for more than 2 or 3 weeks. So if you've got a bleeding ulcer, yes, the drug is great. But after 2 or 3 weeks when the ulcer's healed, if you keep on that drug, you are setting yourself up for a host of problems. Now, one of the problems is you don't absorb minerals when you don't have acids, so you get mineral deficient. The food that we eat isn't sterile, and so you eat some sushi. Well, there's bacteria and parasites and all kinds of stuff on there, and the main defense for the body to prevent this stuff from getting into your small intestine is to nuke it with high acid. The pH of the stomach is like 1 or 2.
To kill bacteria.
To kill the bacteria and the parasites. There is an epidemic now of SIBO. SIBO is small bacterial intestinal overgrowth. And people have bloating and gas and they feel bad. Well, they're on acid blockers. And so the bacteria are getting through their stomach and they're growing in their small intestine where there's lots of food, it's nice and warm, and they do really well. But an even bigger thing is the enzyme which starts protein digestion in the stomach is called pepsin. It's not active unless there's acid there. And so you eat a steak or you eat a piece of fish or you have some eggs and you don't have enough acid in your stomach, which means the enzymes which start the whole digestion process the digestion doesn't occur. And so while you may be eating enough proteins or amino acids, you're not digesting it. It never makes it into your bloodstream and you become deficient.
Right.
And so we've measured thousands of patients where we measure their serum amino acid levels when they come into the clinic. And 95% of people are deficient. All vegetarians and vegans are way deficient.
Wow.
But virtually everybody is deficient in essential amino acids.
And they can just supplement with amino acids.
Well, if they take something like Perfect Amino, it doesn't need to be digested. It's already in the digestible form. And it's actually absorbed through the stomach and into the small intestine. And within like 23 minutes, you can measure these things in the bloodstream.
Wow.
The levels go up. So you sort of bypass one of the big glitches that occurs in many, many people. So you can rehabilitate their protein digestion or their protein levels in their body.
And so what do we do with those people that actually do develop SIBO, this small bowel bacterial overgrowth? Because we see a lot of people online. I mean, there are entire chat forums that are dedicated to just SIBO. How do you address it? I would say, I would imagine first you restore the acid balance to the stomach.
You have to restore the acid balance. You have to also restore digestive balance. And then you have to be able to give them things. I don't go to the usual drug is called Xifaxan. I don't like, and I'm an infectious disease guy. So I don't, antibiotics have their use, but usually you can cure this with less sort of invasive things. Okay. So at Body Health, we have a product called BioClear. It's really good. It's a mixture of essential oils and herbs. And we find that when we do those two things, and then we give some immunoglobulin concentrates. They're kind of like colostrum, but they're a little bit different, where they help heal the intestinal mucosa. And we give them another thing, which is, it's a mineral mix, which helps to seal the leaky gut.
Huge fan of
90% of these patients, their SIBO goes away. They're bloating, their heartburn, their gas, they get better. And it doesn't take that long. Within a month or two, they feel better.
Yeah.
And they start having normal stools.
But you can't, when you take people off of proton pump inhibitors, these PPIs, or they're constantly on, Tums or Rolaids or other antacids, you can't just stop them from taking these and drop them off a cliff. This is a slow process to where and how do you keep the gastroesophageal reflux from coming back? And what are some ways we see in methylation when patients are sometimes put on the proper nutrient regimen? You'll see that sphincter strength kind of returns to that cardiac sphincter, and the acid's no longer splashing out of the stomach.
Right. The main trigger for that muscle to close is acid. And it's a beautiful system, You eat some food, the stomach cells make acid. When the pH is in the 1 to 2 range, there's a trigger for that muscle to close. Then the reflex stops. What happens in many people, and these are maybe people too who aren't on acid blockers, but with aging, most people don't make enough stomach acid by the time they're probably 35 or 40. Like if you put a capsule down there and you measure their acid level, it's maybe 4 or 5. So vinegar is about 4, 4.5. Now it's acid, it tastes acidy. But that acid level is not enough to close the sphincter. So the sphincter's not closed, the pH of the stomach is 4, that gurgles back up. The stomach lining has a mucosa that protects it, but the esophagus doesn't.
Right.
And they get burns. So most of these people, we give them stomach acid. Our digestive enzyme product has stomach acid in it. And we just have them raise the level, sometimes 1 tablet, 2 or 3 tablets with each meal. They get enough acid in there, the darn thing closes, their GERD goes away. They actually never needed an acid blocker. They needed more acid.
That's wild. That is absolutely wild. Before I wanted to take a detour as you were talking about amino acids and their impact on thyroid and thyroid hormones and being raw material for hormone production. But so many people listening to this podcast right now have the Hashimoto's, the autoimmune disease where the immune system is, antibodies against the thyroid. I would say that hundreds and hundreds of these cases come in every month across the nation on our clinics alone. And I'm sure that somebody listening to this has got Hashimoto's. What are you doing in your integrated medicine clinic with Hashimoto's patients? How are you addressing that?
There's a bunch of stuff that leads to an autoimmune condition. So autoimmune, your immune system is supposed to be able to identify self, which is my cells, from not self, which is everything else. And every cell in our body has a label on it that is I got my label and you got your label. If I try to give you some of my cells, like an organ, your body will say, that's the wrong label, I'm going to go after you.
Right.
Okay? But our immune system, when it can get confused about, is this my label or is this a foreign label? Now, if you have thyroid tissue, I think the origin of autoimmune disease is a gut that lets things through, so-called leaky gut, that shouldn't get through. Now, 70% of your immune system is around your small intestine. It's called Peyer's patches, gut-associated lymphoid tissue. That's where the stuff sits. And nature put that there because that's the biggest place where foreign stuff could get in. Because we're eating all the time, the food comes in, it's
out
not
of the
sterile.
intestine and into the bloodstream.
Yeah, and then if it gets into the bloodstream, then you could get sick. You could get bacteria or viruses or parasites or stuff that gets through. So the membrane, the barrier, is supposed to be tight.
Okay.
Now, that thing loosens up with all medications, all toxins, chemicals, pesticides, fast food, all this garbage that people put in our body. It breaks the membrane down. Now you have, remember I said the amino acids can get through, but full proteins can't get through. Well, they can't get through unless there's a hole in that membrane.
Right.
Now they get through. The immune system is set up to identify foreign proteins. Now, if you have some calf liver and that protein goes through, well, that immune cell sees that protein. It's like, hey, you're not supposed to get in here. And it makes an immune attack on it.
Which it would not do if it were an amino acid, so it had already been digested and passed through a smaller membrane and made it into the bloodstream as an amino acid.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. Now, our tissues look a lot like some of the animal tissues that we eat. And the immune system does hey, that looks like that. Oh, that looks like that too. Well, I'm going to attack that. Now, I think the majority of cases, that's what happens. But if you get a thyroid that's full of plastics or heavy metals or root canal toxins or DDT, those cells look funny. And the immune cell says, hey, that looks funny. I'm going to go after it.
Right.
And then in Hashimoto's, you see these enzymes, thyroid peroxidase and antithyroid globulin. You see the body making those things as an attack on the thyroid.
Yes.
Now, the body's not stupid. It's really smart. And it's very efficient. It never does anything for nothing.
Right.
So when it's doing that, it means there's a reason. And what we got to do when we look at Hashimoto's, we're looking at what are the reasons. And the reasons are like, there's two categories. The guy's missing something that should be in his body, or he's got stuff in his body that shouldn't be there.
Right.
It all reduces to that. And then if you do panels of what has he got in his body that shouldn't be there, well, he's got mold toxins and he's got heavy metals and he's got insecticides and chemicals and dyes and
they embed themselves in the thyroid tissue, and now the
That's right.
immune system is on the hunt for that.
That's right. And it's the same with rheumatoid arthritis. It's the same with ulcerative colitis. These autoimmune conditions, which are, they're on a huge upsurge now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I think it's the most prescribed drug right now is either Enbrel or Humira. These are drugs which block the immune system. So someone has a significant autoimmune disease, and they're put on these drugs to do what? Block the immune system.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Wow.
Now, you might shut down someone's symptoms, and people do feel better for as long as they work. And maybe in an emergency, that would be the right thing to do. But if that's your plan in a 40-year-old, you see on the advertisement in the small print, well, you could get tuberculosis, you could get cancer, you could get this, you could get that. Well, you can, because your immune system is now shut down.
Yeah.
So while you're doing that, you better look for what is the underlying cause. Infection's another one. Like Lyme disease, virtually almost every autoimmune disease that we see, these people also, with the rest of the stuff, they have Lyme disease. And
In
so,
almost every one of these autoimmune conditions, they have a
almost
Lyme
every
component.
one.
And are you of the school of thought that Lyme disease only comes from ticks? Or do you think
No, it
there's
definitely
other-
comes from mosquitoes. I think any insect that bit something that got infected can bite you.
Okay.
And then you can get infected.
Yeah, because people
And
are like, how did I get Lyme disease? I'm not in Maine with ticks on my head. And,
These ticks are about as big as a piece of pepper.
Right.
And in probably at least 95% of the cases, at least the ones we see, there was no bullseye rash, there was no
That's
fever,
what I
there
mean.
was no prodrome, they had nothing. They lived in Maryland or New York or in Florida where there are ticks and where they got bit, or where there are mosquitoes and they got bit and they got it. And if they have a very good immune system and the dose that they got from the bite wasn't too much,
To cause
they
symptoms.
probably don't have any problem. If they have, a lot of stuff going on with their body, then they might get sick. And then we see them. I mean, there's this worldwide, Lyme is an epidemic. Infectious disease cycle. Like when I was growing up, we all got strep.
Right.
Okay, 50s, we all got strep. Everybody got their tonsils out. Now,
That's so true.
Hardly
Everybody,
see any
when I was
strep.
growing up, got their tonsils out. Everybody. It was like a rite of passage when you were 12
that's
or
right.
13.
That's right. And then,
Yeah.
then you got a chocolate milkshake in the hospital, and you
That was the only cool thing about
Really
it.
cool
Yeah.
thing.
People like, my friends look forward to it. They're like, all the ice cream I get. I'm like, you're going to lose a body part and gain 2 days of ice cream. It's kind of
Exactly.
a,
So anyway, Lyme is in a heyday right now. I mean,
Yeah.
Lyme goes back. They found Lyme bacteria in Egyptian mummies
wow.
like 3,000 years ago. Is an old organism. It's a very sophisticated organism. I used to be a virologist, bacteriologist. That
Right.
was my training.
I knew you had your fellowship in virology, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So bacteria carry this thing called a plasmid. It's an extra bit of information. And that's how bacteria become resistant. They might have the information that says, if you give me penicillin, I can denature the penicillin so it won't work and kill me. And your average bacteria has 2 or 3 of these things that it can share with other bacteria if it's in a colony.
Okay.
The Lyme bacteria, Borrelia, has like 23 of these things. Like, I think it's the most that
So
anyone ever discovered.
antivirals, you're saying.
Very
they-
sophisticated.
Yeah.
It's got decoys. It can change its surface structure. But part of the problem with it is that the traditional infectious disease diagnostics with antibodies, a lot of times it turns up negative because the surface structure changed and it doesn't have what they're looking for.
So it's not reacting to a traditional Lyme response. So you
That's
don't
right.
see a Lyme antibody, IgG or IgM titer.
That's
So
right.
what else do you look for to try to?
Well, you can see it on a microscope. A lot of times you can see the Lyme bacteria on a blood spot on a microscope.
okay.
You can do PCR testing now, like what was done for COVID.
Right.
Was PCR testing. It's a protein chain, a polymerase chain reaction. It's parts of the DNA that identify the organism. And so there's labs that are doing PCR testing on Lyme and the co-infections that go with it.
And do you think it's enough to do a cheek swab or something to actually and send it into a lab to actually diagnose a Lyme infection? Do you think are they that accurate? These PCRs?
Well, they're pretty accurate.
Okay.
We usually use urine.
Okay.
So you got to give somebody, you got to rough them up a little bit. We put them on a power plate.
Okay.
Okay, for
I
10 or
thought you meant
15
rough them
minutes.
up, like old school.
And when the studies were done by the laboratory, they would do a Rolfing massage on them.
okay.
Give them a lot of water, do a Rolfing massage on them, and then release all these things that are stuck in the tissue then have them urinate and collect their urine.
Okay.
And then you could see the things in the urine.
And now once you find yourself with a Lyme diagnosis, and the thing about Lyme is we know it has such a diffuse, seemingly unrelated myriad of symptoms that can come out of it, from
Great
hormone
imitator.
imbalance to
Great
fatigue
imitator.
to muscle aches to chronic fatigue to all kinds of conditions, and mood disorders and anxieties and all kinds of conditions. So once if someone's listening to this and they have Lyme or have had Lyme or know somebody that has Lyme, what are the next steps? What in your integrated medicine clinic, what would be the next steps for somebody with Lyme?
So what I see, because we see the average person that comes to our clinic has been to 13 doctors,
Wow.
and they've had no diagnosis. And I mean, all day long.
They haven't even been diagnosed.
Well, they've
properly.
been diagnosed with Lyme, and then they got antibiotics for 3 years, 5 antibiotics for 3 years, and they weren't stably better, and they come in. And what you got to do is you got to find all the various things. Like, do they have root canals? Do they have cavitations?
I knew you were featured on The Root Cause, the documentary, right? You were actually, yeah.
I'm the reason that movie happened.
Okay. By the way, I'm a huge fan. I just had Dr. Jigar Gandhi, one of these a biologic dentist. I'm waiting to have a tooth put back in that I just had cleaned and ozoned and he used red light ozone, and also packed it full of my own platelet-rich fibrin.
Yeah.
And then put a zirconian mount in there, and I'm waiting for the bone to final fuse around it, and then he'll cap it again. But I don't mean to take you off track, but my experience was so profound because I consider myself to be pretty, I hate this word, but woke to wellness and biohacking. Yeah. And, and I eat clean, I drink clean water, and take good care of myself. And when I cracked this tooth and told this biologic dentist, Dr. Gandhi, about it, he described to me, it was the 19th tooth meridian. And he asked me if I ever got anterior shoulder pain, left lower lobe pain in my lung, and if my left toe ever went numb. Those was his questions. And I was like, you are freaking me out right now, because all three of those things happened to me. I was like, I thought I just had a little bit of bicep tendon. I thought I had a little catch from like doing HIIT cardio. I thought I had like a little runner's catch. Yep. And then, my wife used to tease me because I would take my shoe off once in a while and itch my toe. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, my toe itches. And 48 hours after he took that out, it was gone.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need to tell the world about this.
Yeah. Listen to this one. I was doing, this was really sort of pre my clinic or just at the beginning of it. I was doing physical exams for a chiropractor who had a decompression device for people with low back pain.
Traction.
And he needed an MD to do exams for him. So once a week I go in there and I do the physical exams. And then he would put him on it was called VAXD.
I remember VAXD.
Vertebral axial decompression.
Yeah, it was traction.
Yeah. Sorry. It healed my severely ruptured disc. But anyway, so this guy would come into the clinic.
Hey guys, if you've been watching the Ultimate Human podcast for any length of time, you know that one thing I do not do is push products. I do not just let any advertiser into this space, because I believe that the products that appear on the Ultimate Human podcast should be things that I use every day in my life to improve my own physiology. One of them is something called the Echo Go Plus. The Echo Go Plus is a hydrogen water generator that you can take on the go. You essentially take the top off of this bottle, you pour bottled water in this, and repeatedly it will make high part per million hydrogen water. You press this little button, you'll see these bubbles going up in the water. That's hydrogen being created in the water. There are all kinds of peer-reviewed, published clinical studies on the benefits of hydrogen water, including reduced inflammation, better absorption of your supplements, better absorption of your foods, better balance of the stomach acid, and it feeds an entire class of bacteria in your gut. Hydrogen water, in my opinion, is the most beneficial water that you can drink, and now you can take it wherever you go. You can go to Echo, ECHO, H2O.com. That's Echo, ECHO, H2O.com. Enter the code ULTIMATE10 for a discount. Echo H2O, enter the code ULTIMATE10 for a discount.
Would take a taxi to the clinic. And then he wore the guys who lay tile, he wore those things on his knees because he didn't walk. He crawled in. So he would crawl into the clinic.
Wow.
And he bought 20 of these treatments. And he had a herniated disc on his MRI. And I approved him for the therapy. He did 20 treatments. He wasn't even ever better. The chiropractor felt kind of sorry for this guy. So he gave him 20 more, just gave it to him. He did 20 more. Pretty soon we're up to 80. And he's not really any better.
Wow.
Okay? So I had just learned this thing called prolotherapy or prolozone, where you inject irritative substances or ozone into a joint space. It produces a reaction to get the healing cycle started again. So he finished his treatment and he's like, this isn't working for me. And every day he's crawling. I mean, he's on all fours crawling in. He couldn't stand up and he couldn't work. And he'd been out of work for like 7 years. He was doing this. Yeah. So I said, why don't you come over to my clinic? Let me try some prolozone on you. So he comes over to the clinic. I put him on the table. I did an exam on him. And part of it is it's an energetic exam. It's called autonomic response testing. And what came on the autonomic response testing was that he had gangrenous pulp tissue in his body. That was the item that was discovered.
Gangrenous pulp tissue. Wow.
Yes. So I said, did the dentist ever tell you you had either a dead tooth or a tooth that got infected and died, or did you ever have a root canal done? Because root canal teeth have gangrenous pulp inside them, even after the procedure's done. And he thinks a minute and he said, oh yeah. He said, I had a root canal done about 7 years ago. So I said, well, give me the story of your back. What happened? And he said, well, I was a HUD carrier. He said, I was in the best shape of my life. I was taking cement on a slate and I was crawling up and down ladders all day long, and I would hand off the plaster to the guy who was doing the stucco. So all day long, and I felt like amazing. And he said, one day I just bent over to tie my shoe, and I got this horrendous pain in my back. And since then, I haven't been able to walk.
Wow.
So I said, well, think back. Did the tooth come after the back or before the back when you had this tooth? He said, yeah, I had a bad toothache. And I went to the dentist, and the dentist did a root canal on it. And when I was sitting in his office while he was doing it, I had this just bad feeling about it. So he said, I went back in there the next day and said, you know, is everything okay? Like, did you do it right? Do you need to modify it? Like, and he said the dentist blew up at him and threw him out of his office. So he had a half-done root canal. He had a temporary cap on it. Wow. 6 weeks later, the back occurs. He has no idea. The tooth is, you know, when you do a root canal, you kill the nerve, so there's no pain there.
Right, so you don't feel the infection. You don't feel pressure or anything.
Yeah. So I said, and so now he's 7 years later and he's crawling, okay, and he can't work. So I sent him to the biological dentist, and they do a cone beam CT scan. They do a CT scan on the teeth. And he's got a horrendous abscess on this tooth.
Wow.
It goes up into the sinus. The dentist pulls the tooth. He got like tablespoons full of pus draining out of his sinus.
Yeah, that maxillary sinus. That's so gross.
I had to have him on antibiotics for 6 weeks because he had a bone infection of the whole area. Walks into my office after this whole thing.
Walks.
Yeah, his back pain's gone. Back pain's gone.
Wow.
Back pain's gone.
I believe that.
So
there's
he
some
says
people
to
that
me,
are going to say that
100%.
teeth are not connected to.
I got 50 cases like this, 100 cases.
Okay.
So
Good.
He says to me,
maybe they'll unpin me.
you
on
help
Instagram.
me. I need a job now. And at the time we were moving our office from one place to another, we need guys to move. And so he became the mover to move our office. And
Really?
he had a herniated disc on his x-ray, but no, that was not the cause of his pain. The cause of the pain was the tooth.
Wow.
He worked for us for about a year, and then I got a Christmas card from him like a year later. He and his wife had walked up to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, and he sent me a Christmas card with him and his wife on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro.
That's so
His back
awesome.
was fine.
That is so awesome.
So it's, you got to get all the other stuff because the three things that I find take down even Samson. It's not his hair.
Right.
It's mold, root canals, and Lyme. Nobody can handle that.
Wow.
They live in a moldy house, they got root canals, and they got Lyme disease. And you got to handle all of them,
Right.
and then they'll get better. If you try to just handle the mold, they won't get better. You sort of have to do the whole thing, because then you just unburden their system, and then they actually get well.
Well, I can tell you, I didn't have Lyme, but I had, I had the root canal. I had 2 of them, and now I've had both of them done. My wife's had 4 of them done. And I've had so many clients of mine that have gone and gotten this biologic dentistry done. And it's not a fun procedure. I mean, nobody likes to go to the dentist, but what was also astounding on my procedure, and right now, if you go to my Instagram, it is flagged. It says false information because I did a podcast with Dr. Gandhi, and he said that specific teeth were related to specific organs in the body, and that you could trace infection in certain tooth to organs in the body. They said that's completely false, and he would probably agree with you, definitely agree with you. But it was such a profound, I've talked about it so much. I mean, it was such a profound thing for me to get rid of all of this, and this like sort of bright light went off. I know so many people are in the same position I was in, because when he pulled that tooth, it didn't even bleed. And I was like, wow, it was really stuck in there. He goes, no, that's a terrible sign. He said, you do not want to see that. And then he cleaned it all out and ozoned it and red lighted it and put my platelet-rich fibrin in there. And I'm completely pain-free. And all 3 of those symptoms are gone.
Yeah. These dental charts have been known in acupuncture. I mean, Chinese medicine is the oldest known medicine.
Yeah.
In Chinese medicine, they had acupuncture meridian lines showing that each of the 12 major meridians go through the teeth. And that in order for a meridian to work, you have to have this flow in the body between the yin organs and the yang organs. Like the heart is the sun organ, it's the yang, it's the male, and the small intestine is the yin, moon, female. And those are they're organs that the flow goes from one to the other. But on that meridian, like the heart is on the wisdom tooth is on the heart meridian.
Right.
If you have problems there, like chronic infection or toxin buildup, it can affect the energy flow in the meridian.
Well, not only that, the same bacteria that is found there is found in cardiovascular disease.
That's right.
Right? I mean,
That's
so
right.
it's the identical bacteria. And if it's only in 2 places, well, probably didn't originate from the heart and move to the tooth.
Right.
It went from the tooth to the
Right.
heart.
And every dentist and every cardiologist knows that if you have gum disease, you have deep pockets in your gum disease, it's a very big risk for heart disease. Well, root canals and cavitations are just as bad. It's bacteria deep in the system, which can have access to other places, and so it can cause infection.
Yeah. So circling back to the Lyme disease, because these are big categories: Hashimoto's, Lyme, even gastroesophageal reflux, which I'm glad we touched on. So there are so many chronic Lyme sufferers out there, and I bet there are people listening to this that actually are suffering from Lyme and don't know it.
Yeah.
Where did they begin with their journey to walk their way out of Lyme? How does that?
Well, I think they have to find first of all, they have to get their lifestyle in order. They have to eat organic food. We usually start people on some version of a paleo diet: meat, fish, eggs, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds.
Whole
Clean.
foods.
Whole foods.
Talk about it all
no
the time.
processed foods, no packaged foods. Okay? They have to work it out. Usually when people go on that diet, their intestine will get better. They have to have a bowel movement every day.
Okay.
They have to get some sunshine and fresh air and some movement. And what I'd say now is, they have to do some breath work and they have to ground.
I did not pay him to say that, but
No, but I mean, I do all this
I'm
stuff
throwing it all over the internet.
for sure. And it's all good.
Yeah.
Okay. Like that's the basic.
Yeah.
Because if I got someone in my clinic, they come into my clinic, the first thing I say to them is, here's the booklet on the paleo diet. And you may do better with a little bit more or less fruit or more or less starchy vegetables, heavier protein, heavier fat. We will work that out. If you have insulin problems and diabetic problems, we push you toward the high protein, low carb. But somewhere in there is the right thing, and you can't eat any processed food. And you have to have clean water, and you have to have a bowel movement every day.
Filter your water.
Yeah. And so that would be the most basic thing. And then when they come in, we measure all this stuff. So they're all deficient in lots of stuff. So they need, vitamins and minerals, and almost all of them are low in vitamin D, and they're low in selenium and zinc and these basic minerals. And a whole bunch of them have methylation problems and a whole bunch of. So it is quite a wide look to find these two basic things that I sort of mentioned earlier, which is they got stuff in their body that shouldn't be there: Lyme, mold toxins, heavy metals, SIBO. These are all things that shouldn't be in their body.
Right.
And so we do sort of an explore of what are those things for that person, and then do levels of vitamins, minerals, amino acids, essential fats to find what are they missing. And then when we put those two things together, they start to heal, because basically the body's built to work.
And is one part of the protocol to kill the virus and the other part to strengthen the immune system to come in and assist in the fight?
Yeah. So things like ozone and hyperbaric oxygen and saunas and, vitamin and mineral infusions and, just depending on the person, then send them to the biological dentist and make sure their teeth are fixed. Like these things go a long way. And then we have, we have therapies like peptides and, where we can coax the immune system one way or the other.
Let's go down the peptide road for a second, because peptides were under a little bit of a war by the FDA.
Most of us have a very difficult time meeting our protein needs, and certain protein sources like whey protein and others can be as little as 20% absorbable. This is 99% absorbable, and it has all of the essential amino acids that the body needs to build lean muscle, to recover, to improve our exercise performance, and most importantly, to repair after we have intense exercise. So this is called Perfect Amino by Body Health. It's, like I said, 99% absorbable. It only has 2 calories. Eventually, the caloric intake has virtually no caloric intake. It will not break a fast. It tastes amazing. You mix it in water. I take this literally every single morning. If you're working out in a fasted state, you have to take a full spectrum amino acid prior to your workout to preserve your lean muscle and make sure that you're recovering properly. And again, it will not break your fast. So the caloric impact is virtually zero. You get all of the full spectrum amino acids. It tastes wonderful. I use it every single day. You can go to bodyhealth.com/ultimate. That's bodyhealth.com/ultimate and look for the Perfect Aminos. They actually come in capsules if you're on the go, or it comes in several flavors that they make in a powder, which I love. It's flavored with natural means of flavoring, so there's no artificial sweeteners in here. So this is one of my absolute favorite products. Give it a try. If you're working out at all, you need a full spectrum amino acid. Go to bodyhealth.com/ultimate. That's bodyhealth.com/ultimate. I love their lab tested products. You can actually see the absorption rate for all of their products. They've got great electrolyte protein combinations. My favorite is the Perfect Aminos. bodyhealth.com/ultimate. And now back to the Ultimate Human Podcast.
And some of my favorites were pulled BPC 157, some of these other peptides that my clinical team had used and practiced with great success. But what are some of the peptides that you would bring into a battle with Lyme disease? Like immune strengthening peptides?
Well, I always go to thymosin alpha-1.
Thymosin alpha-1.
Okay. I always go to BPC. If they have gut problems, I do it both injectable and oral.
Wow.
If they've got any kind of neurological problems, there's the cerebral lysin. There's also a couple of other ones. One's called C-LANC and C-MAX.
Mm-hmm.
These are active on the nervous system to help rebuild, brain-derived
anxiolytic, right? Is that the anti-anxiolytic?
It can be. It can be.
Okay.
It can be. And then LL37 is almost like an antimicrobial. It doesn't really kill it itself, but it stimulates the immune system to kill bacteria. So on the Lyme patients, that's a really good one to add in there.
LL37. And what about in Crohn's?
Well, Crohn's gut stuff. So KPV and BPC orally. And then with Crohn's, I mean, I was talking with your patient we had dinner the other night. I mean, in the 30s, doctors' treatment for Crohn's and for ulcerative colitis was a carnivore diet.
Yeah.
Just eat meat.
Right.
Because the plant lectins are irritative to a lot of people, and that may flare them. And I don't know how he's doing, but I
was actually going to say, because I'm glad you didn't say his name, but he's a very, very well known, very famous client of mine, and you came in and helped him with his Crohn's, and I actually had a Zoom call with him week before last, because this is going back several months.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know if I'm disease free, but I'm symptom free.
Yeah.
So that was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible. We're going to tell his story, and I'm going to make sure that you get credit here very soon. I'm going to have him on the podcast. Everybody knows who he is, but I'm going to have him on the podcast, and he's going to.
Wonderful. I hadn't heard back, so I'm glad.
Yeah. He's doing good. Do you see?
I told him too. You can't. You got to stop drinking.
Yeah, he was.
He
pretty
had
heavy
some
on the
bad
sauce.
habits, so you can't do that.
Yeah. He put those habits, because it got so bad. When he landed in the emergency room at 4:30 in the morning, he was like, okay, I'm committed to changing this now. And I'm really excited for everybody to hear his story, because again, I think there are a lot of people out there that just believe that they've got Crohn's disease and they're on chronic anti-inflammatories and maybe immunosuppressants for the rest of their life. And they're going to avoid the obvious, triggers in their diet, but never really put the condition into remission.
Right.
And you see these conditions going into remission.
We do. We absolutely do.
Yeah.
And some of the most fun ones, like I'm thinking of a woman now. So she has very bad rheumatoid arthritis. She was on steroids and methotrexate, which are medications that are used.
They give you they mimic the gene mutation MTHFR, by the way. They stop folate metabolism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So she had been treated by the rheumatologist, but her condition was worsening. And he had tried some of the biologicals on her, and she didn't tolerate them. And when she came into me, her sedimentation rate, which is a measure of inflammation in the body, was 60. And the diagnostic test, it should be under 15. And the diagnostic test for she had a positive rheumatoid factor at high dilution, and she had a positive ANA, so anti-nuclear antibodies. So she's got a real autoimmune disease. And so she came into me, and we did the basic thing, which is handled her teeth, handled her gut, handled her deficiencies.
Air, water, diet.
All the stuff,
Yeah.
okay? And she spent about probably 3 months in the clinic. She was able to wean off her prednisone. She was able to wean off her methotrexate.
Wow.
We continued with her for 5 more months. So these antibodies, this rheumatoid factor and the ANA, these are antibodies that the body manufactures. And they manufacture them because the body's trying to solve a problem. It's not making these things for nothing. It is trying to handle something. And she also had Lyme disease. We handled her Lyme disease. And then these antibodies probably have a half-life of probably 3 to 4 months. And half of them are gone. And if the body's not making them again, their levels will start to go down.
Right.
And she's now off the medication. So it's not like they're being suppressed by a drug. They're going away. And at 8 months, I redid her sedimentation rate, her rheumatoid factor, and her ANA. Her sedimentation rate was 7. Her rheumatoid factor was negative, and her ANA was negative, and she had old deformities.
Hold on, so she no longer has rheumatoid arthritis.
That's right.
Wow.
And she doesn't have rheumatoid arthritis.
That's so fantastic.
Because her body was doing that to try to fix something. It's not a disease condition in itself.
Right.
It's a body reaction. You have this very highly intelligent system trying to solve a problem.
Right.
And if you're treating people just symptomatically, which could be fine for a while, but if you're not looking behind what is the root cause of what's going on with them, you are not doing really very good medicine. Because in many, many cases, these things are really there. You could find it.
Yeah.
And then people get better.
Yes.
So she said to me at that visit, I showed her the labs and she said, I'm feeling great. I said, well, probably you just keep doing what you're doing. I'll see you in 6 months. She said, do you think I have to go back to your rheumatologist, to my rheumatologist?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'd like you to go back one more time and show him your labs.
Yeah.
And then say to him from me, if he has any patients that he needs some help with, just give me a call.
That's why you're not the favorite in town. Well, there's one more topic that I want to delve into because I know that it's near and dear to everybody listening to this podcast because, everybody listening either has been or knows someone who has been affected by cancer. And I know that's a large part of what you're treating in your clinics. And we can't put all the cancer into one big catch-all. But before the podcast started, you were telling me that there are a lot of common origins for cancer, a lot of common causes for cancer. And we talk about anti-aging and longevity and biohacking. And every time I'm trying to sneak tips out of podcast guests for people that are listening to say, I certainly want to do whatever I can to avoid that. So what are some of these common causes or environmental factors? What are simple things that people can do to reduce their risk that's not fear-mongering, that they could put to practice in their life every day? And God forbid they have it. What are some of the steps that they could take?
So I think here's what I tell patients so they come in with cancer. And why did I get it? Like, why did I get cancer? I haven't lived that badly, or I've tried to be careful, or I've done all this stuff.
I don't smoke. I don't drink. Like the
That's right.
usual thing. They think
The
because
usual
I don't smoke cigarettes or drink a lot of alcohol or live this.
Exactly.
Really.
So I've heard you say many times, aging is a mitochondrial disease. Cancer is a mitochondrial disease. And so what happens? So in our cells, there is a system whereby the cell takes in oxygen, so that's when we breathe, and it takes in fuel, so we eat, and we have carbohydrates and fats and proteins, and those things go into the cell, and in every cell, there's between 1,000 and 2,000 of these little factories, these mitochondria. Okay, in the heart there's more, in the ovary there's more, in the eye there's more. But an average cell has between 1,000 and 2,000 of these.
Think of it, 10%
It's like
of
10%
our body
of the body weight.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
So these things are where the oxygen and the fuel goes. And there are enzyme systems in there so that you can take apart glucose molecules or fatty acids and you can extract the energy that's bound in those things. And then the cell can make ATP. ATP is the energy particle. And when this system is working right, you get 38 ATP for every go around.
Right.
Okay? Now,
With oxygen.
with oxygen. Now, so that's aerobic metabolism, using oxygen. Now, in our body, so every day there's hundreds of thousands of biotoxins that are in the environment that we put on our skin, we eat, we drink, we smell, they come into our body. If our body's unable to handle those things, we have these things build up in certain areas, in certain tissues, and they're unique to each person. But when the biotoxin level in the cell, so the toxin is coming into the cell, gets enough in the cell to affect enough of the mitochondria so that they become now poisoned. They can't use oxygen to make energy anymore. Now, this was discovered by Otto Warburg, a German MD, PhD in the 1930s. He got a Nobel Prize.
Right.
Okay?
Was this what he also worked on multi-step oxygen therapy, I think. Same doctor.
Well, his main fame is that he discovered that this was the key to most cancers.
This metabolic shift.
This metabolic shift.
Okay.
Now, the cell, when this happens, is supposed to kill itself. We have a gene in us
Autophagy,
called
yeah.
P53. The gene is supposed to turn on. It sends a message to the cell that autophagy, now you're supposed to die. And the cell dies. Sometimes the switch that the P53 gets turned on by is also poisoned. Now the cell can't kill itself. Now, if that abnormal cell is noticed by an immune cell, it might take it out.
Okay.
But if it's not noticed, now that cell has to transform its way to make energy without oxygen. So this is anaerobic metabolism.
Right.
Now, anaerobic metabolism is very inefficient.
Right.
If you take in no oxygen, you take in, and the preferred fuel is either glucose or some amino acids, single amino acids. Glutamine is the main one. It can make ATP, but it can only make 2 of them. It's very inefficient. Is that 38?
Barely limping along.
Right.
Okay.
And so now what this cell does is it turns on genes, so-called cancer genes. They're not cancer genes at all. These are the genes that took an embryo, a fertilized egg, and turned it into a body. Now, cancer has 2 characteristics. It grows out of control, so it grows very fast, which is what happens in an embryo. If cells growing very fast, and basically one union of a sperm and an egg, and in 9 months you got a whole developed body.
Right.
Okay?
That's incredible.
And the second thing about cancer is that these cells don't stay where they're supposed to. Like you never see a breast cell in bone in a healthy person.
Right.
They stay there. There's adhesion factors and they stay there. But in cancer, the adhesion factors are lost, which is what happens in an embryo. These cells have to move. You know, the testicle started in the kidney.
Right.
Okay. Nerves started in the spinal cord, but they got all the way out to your fingers and toes. They had to be able to move. So these cancer cells have to be able to do this. And those genes in an adult cell are turned off. So the cancer cell turns them back on. Growth genes, genes to grow new blood vessels, genes to turn up metabolism to grow faster, genes to change the surface of the cell so that it can get in more glucose.
Nutrients, yeah.
Nutrients. So a PET scan is a testament that if you have a normal cell that takes in 1 unit of glucose, I saw someone last week on the PET scan, that cell was taking in 68 units of glucose compared to the 1 in the healthy cell.
Wow.
This is a rabid tumor that was just growing crazy in the guy's liver. Okay? So the cell now is using glucose, and if it's got 68 times the metabolism, even though it's only 2, it can make a whole lot of ATP and it can grow.
Right.
And so what we got to do is we got to be able to get people on the first part of this thing. It just goes back to basic lifestyle. Like toxins do matter, and the number of them that you're exposed to does matter.
Right.
And being able to keep your liver detox systems up, and you're, going to the bathroom and get ring stuff and sweating and these sorts of things really matter, because the origin of this whole thing is that. Now add to it viruses. There's some viruses that are associated with cancer. And there's some funguses and fungal toxins also poison mitochondria.
So some of these mycotoxins.
These
mold
mycotoxins,
poisoning,
yeah. And parasites produce toxins. So in many cancer patients, we find mycotoxins, we find parasites, and we find viruses, HPV and retroviruses.
Present
and
in
herpes.
an enormous number of colon cancers. You were telling me 92, 93%.
Huge
Not
percentage.
caused by, but present in.
It's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the throat cancers too. They have HPV there. So these are factors which, you can't always control what you get, but if you can keep your basic health on a higher level, you can do better.
So should the average person who has history of cancer in their family that's not genetic, not BRCA related, or what testing should they get done if they want to just be sure? What action could they take? Obviously, clean diet, filter your water, sunlight, grounding, breath work, these kinds of things, stressors, cold showers or cold plunging, heat, saunas. My audience especially is really, on board and woke to those kinds of things. But what kind of assurance testing or other measures could they do to say, man, is there just a standard viral panel that I could pull, or mycotoxin panel? I've felt kind of off lately. Where do I start with testing?
I think you start with a functional medicine doctor.
Okay.
I think you need a real doctor, a real doctor.
Well, you're
Or
an
real
MD. You're a
medicine.
real doctor.
I know. I mean, real medicine. You break your leg.
People call me one, but I am not a doctor.
Right.
Right.
You break your leg. You need a C-section. You got a head injury. You know, you're having a heart attack. Well, real medicine is really good for that stuff.
Excellent.
But if you have chronic symptoms, you know, you got headaches or high blood pressure or high cholesterol or any of the diabetes, you know, you need to see a practitioner who's doing functional medicine will pay attention to these other things.
Right.
And then, and they come in all forms, chiropractors and naturopaths and osteopaths and MDs, where they're actually looking at you very carefully with a much broader scope than the sort of standard MD look, and will test you more widely.
Okay.
And then I think just very prudent things like if you're a female, get a breast exam every year, get a thermogram every year. Okay, get a Pap smear.
Not a mammogram, a thermogram, and a breast exam.
That's
There's
right.
a difference. Okay.
That's
So I
right.
wanted to
And
just
do
clarify
self-checks. I mean, all these
Right.
sort of basic things.
Right.
And if you have something going on in your body that's not normal, don't ignore it. Find somebody who can actually check you out and find it, because the earlier it's found, the better off you're going to be.
Of course.
You know, if you have a brewing something, it's better to get it earlier. Now, nowadays, there's all these fancy tests that are, you know, you can get whole body MRIs, you know, looking for stuff.
Right.
And there's good and bad to that, but sometimes you find stuff that you're glad you found it.
Right.
There's Cologuard, which is like if you're over 30 years old, you know, and it's actually even insurance covered, is you submit a poop specimen and you see, you know, do you have brewing colon cancer?
Right.
Okay. And most doctors on a full physical exam will do a rectal exam and they'll check the stool to see if there's blood in it.
Right.
Like these are big diseases, which are, you know, cancer is on a meteoric rise.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
And so I think it is worthwhile to be prudent about looking after this stuff.
Yeah.
And then if you've got parasites, if you've got fungal toxins, is work with a practitioner who can help you get that stuff. And you'll find that your level of health will go up.
Yeah.
And you'll feel better. And
Feel
then your chances
amazing.
of getting some chronic problem is way better.
Yeah. Just, it is astounding to me. Like, you know, prevention is the new cure. I mean, clearly, and the functional medicine, you know, the growth of functional medicine and integrated medicine, I think, on the backs of COVID, is serving humanity well. People are awakening to the fact that they can take healthcare back into their own hands. So in your clinical practice, when these patients have cancer, you have a very unique approach, in my opinion, to how you're treating them. Testing the blood and testing the cancer for the type of chemotherapeutic agent that has the highest, you know, efficiency.
Right.
Using smaller amounts of chemo targeted by putting patients into a state of ketosis, and actually using that seething demand that the cancer cell has for glucose, for energy, as a way to sort of Trojan horse the chemotherapy into the patient, even using insulin,
Right.
and glucose as, you know, as a delivery pathway.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can we, because this is part of a clinical trial, can we touch on that for a second? Are you comfortable talking about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, see, the only thing that matters is what you're doing making the patient better.
That seems so like duh. Modern medicine should know that, but sometimes we're like, we don't even take that approach. You know,
And I'm agnostic on it. You know, like they killed Mozart with mercury. Okay, not a good outcome. They
Right.
killed George Washington by bleeding him out. Okay, so I think you just have to look. It's outcome-based medicine. It's outcome. So one of the very effective treatments in cancer that's done by mainline cancer is like testicular cancer. The cure rate is really high, like above 90%. So if someone comes to me if a young man, it's usually young men, come to me with prostate cancer, I will say, you know, there's a 90% cure if you just go to the oncologist. I will help you with nutrition and immune boosting and these other things. the therapy that he's going to do with you, while harsh, within 6 months has a 90% chance of actually curing you. And the residuals of the therapy that he uses, we can usually deal with so that we can clean you out afterwards. Go there, do that, okay? Another one's like Hodgkin's lymphoma. The cure rate is pretty darn good. Now, a lot of the other cancers, especially if they're, stage 2, 3, 4, like it's out of the area. I think what I tell people is, when you see the oncologist, is show me what the 5-year survivals are for what you're going to do. Because that's an outcome-based measurement.
Right.
And then, we have our own outcome-based measurements. And I think the patient really is then in a position to decide, like, where are my best chances?
Meaning,
and so
what is the 5-year survival rate with the plan that you're going to put me on?
Yeah. I had somebody last week with he had a stage 4 cancer of his bile duct. This is like a nasty cancer. And he had seen a couple of oncologists, and I said, "Did you ask him?" And he said he really hadn't. And I just took out my phone and I just Googled 5-year survival of stage 4 biliary duct cancer. And it varied between 13 and 15% as a 5-year survival.
Wow.
Which is, the guy was actually a little miffed at me that I said that to him. But I said, you're trying to make a decision on what should you do, because your life is at stake. This is a very serious disease. And I'm not promising him a rose garden at all.
Right.
Because this is a very serious disease. But here's what we would do versus what they would do. And then you can make an informed choice as to what you think is the best way to go. And we are trying to do it such that we boost immunity, we attack cancer cells, but if we, in the process of attacking cancer cells, using low-dose chemotherapy, but also things like intravenous vitamin C and curcumin and some other things will kill cancer cells, is do it so that we make sure if our therapy is injuring the patient too much, that we got to think of other things to do. So if you add hyperbaric oxygen and hyperthermia and ozone and really other things at the same time, you can often kind of get away with more,
right?
And improve outcomes. So that's what we're trying to do. And there's no, there's no magic bullet.
Right.
Nixon in 1972, I think, declared a war on cancer, where hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars got poured into cancer research. And there's a whole lot of smart people that have been trying to figure this thing out. And nobody's got it figured out.
Right.
This is 50-something years later.
Yeah.
So this is very, very complicated.
Yeah.
And we certainly don't have it figured out either.
Right.
But we have an approach that's different. And if someone's uncomfortable with what they're hearing, I just say, just take a look, see what resonates with you.
Right.
Because the most important thing is you believe in what you're getting.
Yes. Oh, and I believe that if you believe more in the outcome, you can influence the outcome. And there's some evidence of that too.
For sure.
People's attitude and
some people are just so stubborn they won't die.
Yeah. You hear that? The more stubborn you are, the longer you live. I don't know if I've seen a study on longevity and being stubborn, but
and it's very funny. Sometimes the stubbornness is I'm going to live until my granddaughter gets married. And sometimes the stubbornness is, I'm going to live just because if I died, he'd be happy.
I love that. Oh, curmudgeon.
It doesn't actually matter. Yeah. They just need a reason.
Yeah, they just need a reason. Well, this has just been fascinating. I think this is going to go down as one of my greatest podcasts ever, and I hope that in the future you'll come back on the podcast. I love that we went down the road of Lyme disease and amino acids and cancer and Crohn's disease and autoimmune and everything else, because these are big topics to my audience. Where can people find out more about you? Where can they find out more about your clinic, more about your products? Where can they find out more about
So our clinic is LifeWorks Wellness Center. The website is LifeWorks Wellness Center, all one word.com.
Okay.
Terrible website name, but that's what it is.
Okay.
We're in Clearwater, Florida. We're seeing patients. We're seeing new patients.
Right.
And some of our patients are real elite athletes, because I'm an athlete and they want to come and do stuff with us. So we see those patients.
Right.
And a lot of our patients have like serious neurologic disease, like we do really well with MS and Parkinson's and things like that. And then autoimmune diseases of all kinds, and Lyme disease, and patients with cancer. So that really is where we specialize. We started a company, my son and I started a company about 20-something years ago, where we needed to have products that people needed but weren't existing in the existing space. And so we started a product company. It's called Body Health. So the website is bodyhealth.com. And we probably have about 30 or 35 different products. Perfect Amino is one of those products.
I'm a huge fan of that one.
And metal-free and chemical detox is another one of those products.
Huge fan of that one too.
And so all the products that we have come out of our clinic. Like, we need something. The existing stuff just isn't good enough.
Right.
What can we do to sort of put it in that space? So we have 2,000 doctors, nutritionists and chiropractors and osteopaths and medical doctors that use our products in their clinic because they find the products are just really effective for what they're trying to do. And these are all functional medicine people.
Because it was born from a functional medicine need.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so we're working on products all the time to develop new stuff because there's lots of new technology, there's lots of new science, and the field is just like exploding.
Oh, it's on fire.
And I've never been more excited in my life about seeing. Like, my favorite thing is seeing a new patient.
Right.
Okay, I love it, and then what do we need for these patients that doesn't currently exist that we can develop with our research team to put together unique products that really make a difference for people.
That is so awesome. I end every podcast by asking every podcast guest the same question. So there's no right or wrong answer to this question. Okay. You ready for it?
I should remember it, and I can't remember what you were going to ask.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't been watching my podcast, Dr. Minkoff.
But I can't remember what you were asking.
What does it mean to you to be an ultimate human?
Listen, I think it's interesting. I think I was like 9 or 10 years old, and I read a little kid's version of Einstein's biography. And that I was like inspired. And he mentioned that he probably hadn't used 90% of his potential, and that the humans rarely ever achieved their potential. And so my sort of quest in my life was, how can every one of us is given a gift, I believe, by God and you're here for a reason, and you're here to maximize your own potential to help people and do good, create effects that make life better for people. And so I feel like I'm sort of a warrior for that cause. Right. So, I love your aging statement about relentless pursuit of comfort. So I'm in the cold plunge, and I'm sauning, and I'm done. I mean, an Ironman triathlon is a real mental challenge. Right. And so there's very few people on the earth that have done.
And you've done 44 of them.
It's actually should be 43 in case somebody's
I'm going to give you the extra 4. We were joking beforehand. The fact checkers are going to find that.
Yeah. So how do you maximize your own potential, your intelligence, your ability? How can you make the biggest effect? Starting with myself, and then with my family, and with my my friends and associates, and my business, and then Sue, my wife and I, Sue, we always have animals, so we got animals, and then the sort of the expanding universe of influences that you have, and how can you, my model is I'm in my rocking chair, and I know that tomorrow's my last day, and I'm looking back on my life, and how did I do? How did I do in that regard to make it better and easier so other people could maximize their potential, both physically and emotionally and spiritually. We are immortal spiritual beings, and there's a kernel there that needs education too, and needs to get, needs help, and needs to be able to know what in the hell's going on and how to do it. And so if I can be part of that movement to make this place, remove insanity and remove war, and reward beings for doing good, I'll live a good life.
Well, you got my vote. In my opinion, you are an ultimate human. Thank you so much, Dr. Minkoff, for coming on the podcast. And as always, that's just science.